Well, howdy, y'all. Welcome to Once Upon a Time in Texas, episode number 112. I'm your host, Michael Mitchell. So just a little bit of local stuff going on. So there's been some fun back and forths about an old barge that's out on Lake Arrowhead that apparently used to service the oil derricks that are out there. Yes, we have a lake with oil derricks in it. And anyway, there was some misinformation that got out. Basically, some people were implying that this old barge, and I didn't even know there was a barge out on the lake, and I've lived here a big chunk of my life. But yeah, pretty much there's some people out there likening it to the Exxon Valdez disaster in Alaska, and really it's not bad. Apparently, the city's been in touch with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and apparently they're making some plans on how to remove the barge, basically get it off the lake. But it's been marooned for quite some time, and I'm not poking fun at it. Obviously, some old piece of equipment can cause some problems with the water, but there were all kinds of rumors going around that the city was being fined, billions of dollars, and, it was killing everything from fish to small children kind of stuff. Anyway, it's not that bad. Apparently it's, basically the city's handling it well with TCEQ, and all that. So it's working out. But anyway, that's kind of been the fun stuff here lately. I hate it when misinformation gets out, but it is what it is. And the city of Wichita Falls is working with them, I guess, to, remedy the situation. This morning we had city council where our reinvestment zone through the state of Texas and the county appraisal district was approved. And then we also created the neighborhood empowerment zone officially, the NEZ. And so all of that went well, and there's lots of stuff going on with that part of the city revitalization. Just proud to be a part of that, and just know that there's a lot more stuff coming down the pike as far as that. However, during that time, I did have one little dig from Mayor Tim Short, and although he meant it in jest, and I took it in jest, and still do, I laugh and smile about it, but yeah, I'm going to go ahead and bring it up in my podcast. So during some questioning about marketing for our city revitalization zone, our NEZ, Mr. Battolino brought up, Councilman Battolino brings up something about marketing and how we're going to let people know. And then he says, well, maybe a local guy that has a podcast called Once Upon a Time in Texas can talk about it. And Mayor Tim Short, smiling, and he meant it as a fun little jab, says, okay, that covers like 3 people. How are we going to get it out to everybody else? And everybody in the room just kind of goes, oh. And even Counselor Austin Cobb goes, well, I listened to it. And Tim goes, well, that's 4. So anyway, just to set the record straight, Mayor Tim Short, it's more than 4 listeners. We've had over 8,500 to date listening to the podcast. So it's growing. Actually, more and more people are listening to it. And so, Mayor Tim, that was a good dig, and I certainly appreciate a good dig. But this is my podcast, so I get to dig back a little bit. And you're doing a heck of a job, sir. I appreciate everything you do for our town. So I want to take a look at a couple of Texas wanderers. One wandered around Texas with the purpose, and the other one not so much, it appears. Before we jump into this, and it's going to be a little longer one, I want to thank our sponsors as always, me and Victory Home Loans. I know there are tons of people moving to and in Texas and Oklahoma. And, long and the short of it is, send them my way. I'm an independent mortgage loan originator, which basically means I go out and do the shopping for you and find the best product, the best deals, all that. So come on over, check me out, themichaelmitchell.com, THE, michaelmitchell.com. We do all kinds of stuff, land, reverse mortgages. Of course, we do our usuals, conventional, FHA, USDA, VA, all that kind of stuff. We even have an FHA 0% down program currently, which is good. I can do mobile homes. I know I've been asked about that quite a bit. Even have a company that we work with that will do twice moved mobile homes. It's tough. I'll be honest, doing one right now, and we've been on it for a couple of months. It's a pain, but we can do them. So, anyway, send those folks you know over, or if you're listening from some other state and thinking about moving here, check me out. Texas and Oklahoma. Love helping people out. So where did this week's idea come from? Well, one just continues on with basically my people in Texas history idea. The other one came from a Facebook post or story from my buddy Michael Kurtz. Now, Michael will tell you he can't do math to save his life. He's doing some college stuff, working towards an associate's, and he was just griping last night about he can't do math to save his life. And I asked him if he wanted some tutoring from my 17-year-old daughter, and he said absolutely, probably, because she is a whiz with math. Lorelai is. So he can't do math, at least on the college level anyway, but he can read, at least somewhat well, a little anyway. And he read this article and sent it to me. So shout out to you, Michael Kurtz. You're going in the podcast this week. Well, at least the article you shared with me. So the first one we're going to talk about is a guy that we all know well, especially if you know anything about Texas history. It's a guy named Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, or Santa Anna, however you want to say it. Most of us know about Santa Anna and his battle in Texas during the War for Texas Independence. We've talked about this before, and you know, whether he was right in doing so or not, I mean, there's all kinds of conflicting views, but the long and the short of it is we kind of thumbed our nose at Mexico, pissed him off, and he came up here ready to throw a whooping. He does a couple of times, and anyway, we end up winning in the long run. So, but really it's kind of like, we all know about that, but where did he come from? And how did he get to be kind of the head dude in Mexico? And through this podcast, you'll find out he wasn't the head dude just once. It was like 3 or 4 times. But let's start with kind of a high-level view of his life and his rise to power, and then we'll drill it down a little more. So a lot of this I did find on the old Wikipedia, and you can find all this, and there's a bunch of it I cut out, but I'm going to just, throw this out to you. So Antonio de Padua Maria Severino Lopez de Santa Anna y Perez de Lebrón, better known as Santa Anna, was a Mexican general, politician, and caudillo who served as the 8th president of Mexico on multiple occasions between 1833 and 1855. He was like the 8th, 10th, 12th, and 14th president or something. Anyway, he also served as vice president of Mexico from 1837 to 1839. He was a controversial and pivotal figure in Mexican politics during the 19th century, to the point that he has been called an uncrowned monarch, and historians often refer to the 3 decades after Mexican independence as the Age of Santa Anna. So Santa Anna was in charge of the garrison at Veracruz at the time Mexico won its independence in 1821. He would go on to play a notable role in the fall of the First Mexican Empire, the fall of the First Mexican Republic, the promulgation of the Constitution of 1835, the establishment of the Centralist Republic of Mexico, the Texas Revolution, the Pastry War, the promulgation of the Constitution of 1843, and the Mexican-American War. He became well known in the United States due to his role in the Texas Revolution and in the Mexican-American War. Throughout his political career, Santa Anna was known for switching sides in the recurring conflict between the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party. He managed to play a prominent role in both discarding the Liberal Constitution of 1824 in 1835 and in restoring it in 1847. He came to power as a liberal twice in 1832 and 1847, respectively, both times sharing power with the liberal statesman Valentin Gomez Farias. And both times, Santa Anna overthrew Gomez Farias after switching sides to the conservatives. Santa Anna was also known for his ostentatious and dictatorial style of rule, making use of the military to dissolve Congress multiple times and referring to himself by the honorific title of His Most Serene Highness. That cracks me up. I used to work with a pastor out in West Texas who was the right and worshipful, and then his name. And then he did some other stuff, and it was what was it? The high and resolute, right and worshipful. Anyway, and then his name. It was just crazy. So sometimes I think maybe he gave that name, maybe not. I don't remember. So his intermittent periods of rule, which lasted from 1832 to 1853, witnessed the loss of Texas, a series of military failures during the Mexican-American War, and the ensuing Mexican secession. His leadership in the war and his willingness to fight to the bitter end prolonged the conflict. More than any other single person, it was Santa Anna who denied Polk's dream of a short war. They're talking about Polk, President Polk in the U.S. Even after the war was over, Santa Anna continued to cede national territory to the Americans through the Gadsden Purchase in 1853. So anyway, it goes on through a little bit more crap about him, which we're going to get to. Historians debate the exact number of his presidencies, however, as he would often share power and make use of puppet rulers, which I thought was interesting. So he was officially president like 3 times, but then other times he kind of was because he had a puppet ruler. Anyway, obviously his legacy lives on. We're still talking about him. So let's talk about his early life. So Antonio de Padua Maria Severino Lopez de Santa Anna y Perez de Lebrón was born in Zalapa, Veracruz, Nueva España, New Spain, on February 21st, 1794, into a respected Spanish family. He was named after his father, who was born in 1761, who was a university graduate and a lawyer, and his mother, Manuela Perez de Lebrón y Cortez, that was his mom. That was her name. So they have a tendency of mixing the mother and father's name to make huge long names. Santa Anna's family prospered in Veracruz, where the merchant class dominated politics. His paternal uncle, Angel Lopez de Santa Anna, was a public clerk, or as they call it, an escribano. It's hard to say for me. And became aggrieved when the town council of Veracruz prevented him from moving to Mexico City to advance his career. Since the late 18th century, the Spanish crown had favored peninsular-born Spaniards, basically people born in Spain, over American-born. Young Santa Anna's family was affected by the growing disgruntlement of Creoles, whose upward mobility was thwarted. Santa Anna's mother favored her son's choice of a military career, supporting his desire to join the Spanish army, rather than be a shopkeeper as his father preferred. Wow, did his father miss the mark. Holy smokes. I don't know. I say he missed the mark. Maybe he would have been a better shopkeeper than he was president and leader of the Mexican army. I don't know. Things could have been different. His mother's friendly relationship with the intendant or governor of Veracruz secured Santa Anna's military appointment, despite the fact that he was, in fact, underage at the time. His parents' marriage produced 7 children. He had 4 sisters and 2 brothers, and Santa Anna was close to his sister Francisca and his brother Manuel, who also joined the army. So Santa Anna's origins on Mexico's eastern coast had important ramifications for his military career, as he had developed immunity from yellow fever, which was endemic to the region. The port of Veracruz and environs were known to be unhealthy for those not native to the region, so he had a personal strategic advantage against military officers from anywhere else in Mexico. So that's kind of cool. Being an officer in a time of war was a way that a provincial middle-class man could vault from just pure obscurity to a position of leadership. Santa Anna distinguished himself in battle, a path that led him to a national political career. Santa Anna's provincial origins made him uncomfortable in the halls of power in Mexico City, which were dominated by cliques of elite men, and thus he frequently made retreats to his base in Veracruz. He cultivated contact with ordinary Mexican men and persuaded entertainment such as cockfighting, which is done with chickens, just in case nobody knows. So, in case you plan to get into cockfighting, you probably need to do your research, because it has to do with chickens and not anything else. Over his career, Santa Anna was a populist caudillo, a strong man wielding both military and political powers, similar to others who emerged in the wake of the Spanish-American Wars of Independence. Now, let's jump to after the War of Texas Independence, okay? I know you guys are probably going, what? We're taking out a lot of history, and we are. There's a bunch of crap that Santa Anna did in Mexico, and it's all interesting. But I just kind of want to talk a little bit about, him and basically Texas. So, after the War for Texas Independence, Santa Anna was, of course, captured in Texas, and after 3 weeks in captivity, Texas President David G. Burnett and Santa Anna signed the treaties of Velasco, stating that in his official character as chief of the Mexican nation, he acknowledged the full, entire, and perfect independence of Texas. In exchange, Burnett and the Texas government guaranteed Santa Anna's safety and transport to Veracruz. Meanwhile, in Mexico City, they hear about this, pisses the government off, and they declare that Santa Anna was no longer president and that the treaties were null and void. Makes sense, right? He wasn't specifically exiled, but he was sent to Washington, D.C., because apparently Texas didn't know what else to do with him. And he stays there for a while. He was released by President Andrew Jackson in 1837 and was allowed to return to Mexico. But then Mexico gets in a whizzing match with France after they demanded some financial compensation for basically support, from what I gathered, during Mexico's independence. France gets irritated, sends ships to Veracruz to ruffle some feathers, which it did. And it was called the Pastry War, which I don't know why. It just cracks me up. I didn't quite understand. I didn't dive deep into it. But they called it the Pastry War. And anyway, so it just cracks me up. I'm sorry. Anyway, Santa Anna is given control of the army and is told to defend Mexico by any means necessary. He gets in a couple of battles. He's forced to retreat after a failed assault on the French. And due to some cannon fire, he receives wounds to his legs and hand, which results in the amputation of his leg, which he had buried with full military honors. So anyway, I'm going off script a little bit now, just kind of writing it in my own words. So anyway, things settle out with the French. Santa Anna decides to use his amputated leg and mangled hand to show his commitment to Mexico, and he gets back into politics. He ends up being president again, but gets ousted in 1844. People are upset, probably because he said that no one listened to their podcast, Mayor Tim. Sorry, Mayor Tim Short, got to dig you a little bit there. Anyway, so they get upset, and he basically tries to run away and kind of hide out for a bit. He's captured in 1845. And he's held prisoner and is eventually exiled to Cuba. So his life is spared, but they're like, go to Cuba. Okay? So 1846 rolls around. The Mexican-American War is happening. The Mexican president, Mariano Paredes, is removed from office, probably again for talking bad about somebody's podcast. And the government wants to reinstate the Constitution of 1824 and Santa Anna. He declines, but does agree to lead the military against this conflict with the U.S. And there's a lot of history in the Mexican-American War, but suffice to say, it didn't go well, particularly for Santa Anna. I think he maybe sort of ends up president again. I don't remember. Anyway, two big insults come out of this. And insult number one is the capture of his prosthetic cork leg during the Battle of Cerro Gordo, which is now a war trophy held by the Illinois State Military Museum, but it's not on display anymore. And then a second peg leg that was captured by the 4th Illinois troops and was reportedly used by soldiers as a baseball bat. But it is, at least at the time of this writing or when I found out about it, it is displayed at the home of the Illinois governor, which I thought was kind of cool. So the prosthetic leg, and this is kind of funny, plays a role in international politics. As relations between the U.S. and Mexico warmed up during the run-up to World War II, Illinois is rumored to be ready to return the prosthetic leg to Mexico, and in 1942, a bill was introduced in the state legislature. The Association of Limb Manufacturers wanted to be part of the repatriation ceremonies. The state passed a non-binding resolution to return Santa Anna's prosthetic leg, but the National Guard says, screw that, we're not giving it up. And so they keep it. As of 2016, the leg still resides in the Illinois State Military Museum in Springfield, Illinois. I love that. By God, we're not giving the leg back. It makes me think of Rocket in Guardian of the Galaxies. He's like, I need the battery, a screwdriver, this, that, and the other, and that guy's leg. And turns out he doesn't need the leg. He just thought it was funny. So anyway, all right, back to the story. So at this time, Mexico is defeated in 1848. Santa Anna goes into exile again in Jamaica, and 2 years later moves to New Granada, which is now Colombia. In 1853, the Mexican government is overthrown again, this time by clergy or churchmen, and there's a lot to read about there. I'm not going to get into it, but go read about that. Anyway, Santa Anna is elected president again. During this time, he sells some land, mostly parts of New Mexico and Arizona, to the U.S. For them to have an easier path to build the Transcontinental Railway. It's basically a small chunk of New Mexico and basically the southern half of Arizona. I didn't quite understand all this, but basically Santa Anna gets impatient, and rather than waiting on things to get surveyed out and the money and blah, 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 he goes and borrows money from banks in Mexico to get some fast cash. And after all is said and done with this purchase, the bankers basically make about $650,000, and the Mexican government only made like $250,000. But then I found somewhere else that the U.S. actually paid like $15 million for this. So I'm not sure, but one article read, both articles that I read basically said the bankers came out way better than the Mexican government did. So this, of course, made some other folks mad once again, probably because, he said he didn't listen to their podcast. And Santa Anna gets overthrown and goes into exile again in 1855. He remains in exile, but tries several unsuccessful business ventures, including several ventures in the U.S. where he tries to get wagon wheel manufacturers in New York, I think, to maybe use some products out of Jamaica or Colombia. Anyway, I'm not sure. Anyway, several business ventures he tries. Most of them are fairly unsuccessful. And after roughly 19 years, 20 years, he is allowed to return to Mexico. By this time, he's crippled up. I mean, he already had a peg leg, right? And he's mostly blind from cataracts. And so in 1874, he's allowed to come back to Mexico, gets a home in Mexico City, and passes away at his home in 1876 at the ripe old age of 82, and was buried with full military honors in a glass coffin. Think about that, though. This guy was president somewhere between like 2 and 6 times. He's been in all these conflicts, just all this stuff, and he lives to be 82 years old. Holy smokes. So anyway, I think that's cool, and that gives you a little more just history on Santa Anna, who wandered around Texas for a short time. Now let's shift to another wanderer. This is the Burro Lady of West Texas. This article was from the Texas Observer from March 23rd, 2007, and was called The Mystery Everyone Loved, and can be found at texasobserver.org. Thank you, Michael Kurtz, for sending this to me, because I had never heard of this, even though I did serve close to this area when I worked for the Boy Scouts in West Texas. So here's the way the article reads, and I'm just reading it straight from the article because I can't say it any better. The Burro Lady. She's gone. Say you were way out in far west Texas, careening down Highway 90 between Marfa and Valentine. It's empty out there. A big, blazing bowlful of sun. The yellow ocean of grass. Those bald, old mountains to the left and the right. No people, or hardly any. You were in the middle of telling your mom, your friend, your lover, whoever, the kind of story you tell on a long road trip. Your eyes light on an unexpected shape on the roadside ahead, and as you get closer, spinning along at 70 miles an hour, you stop talking. Your mom or friend or whoever is looking now too, at the elephantine hump that's moving steadily down the bar ditch, and you realize, hey, that's a woman on a burro. That was Judy Magers, Magers, otherwise known as the Burro Lady. In 1982, Bill Ivy ran the Lajitas Trading Post. Back then, before the traditional crossings across the Rio Grande were bulldozed and closed, the post was a hangout and mercantile for Mexican workers going back to San Carlos, Chihuahua, the river runners who left someplace else for Terlingua, and the tourists who strayed outside the boundaries of Big Bend National Park. That's when Judy arrived, more or less. She camped on the river at the rafting put-in for the Colorado Canyon. She was all alone, and she didn't speak. It took her 45 minutes to work up the courage to ask me for the groceries she wanted, Ivy recalls. When she first came, she wouldn't talk to anybody. On January 26th of 1982, on January 26th of this year, so that's 2007, Ivy learned that she had died that day at age 65. He was her legal guardian and arguably her best friend. But the Big Bend is the edge of the known universe, or at least it can feel that way. We saw her, even if she didn't see us. Judy had more friends than she had ever known. Judy lived at the Colorado Canyon camp for a long time, and when the site became part of the Big Bend National Park, she moved on to property owned by Ivy. About 5'3", Judy was skinny as a fence post, and she nearly always wore big dark glasses and a hat. Behind those glasses, her eyes were a luminous light blue-green. She never would talk about her past to me, Ivy says. Not much is known about her. Perhaps because of this isolation, people in the Big Bend are usually tolerant of eccentricities. We're all we've got. If Judy didn't want to talk, no one pushed her to. If she wanted to live utterly alone, that was her deal. Gradually, she became somewhat more social. I was fortunate to see her blossom, Ivy says. For years, she wouldn't talk to anyone but me, but over time, she became more trusting. It was in Lajitas, sometime in the 80s, that she acquired her first burro, and with it, she became increasingly nomadic. Her home was the Big Lonesome, as they call that area. Alone with her burro, she roamed the bar ditches from Terlingua to Marfa and from Marathon to Sierra Blanca. She carried whatever she required on the back of her donkey, and he was ever laden with a tangled heap of tarps, blankets, trinkets, and utensils. There seemed to be things, less tangible things, she carried that were heavier than cookpots and blankets. While she occasionally visited A little with friendly folks about saddles or animals, Judy rejected most conversation, certainly with strangers. She traveled a singular path for reasons known only to her, and what secret she had remained a secret. She earned new names since not many people knew her legal name. Most called her the Burro Lady. Her bearing in the saddle was erect, almost regal, and the stately image was heightened by the burro's majestic slow pace. A friend once told me his family called her La Reina, or the Queen. It was what we called her in my household. For years, this is how it was. She'd spend the winter camped outside Marfa, hang out a few days near Alpine, and next appear 100 miles away at a truck stop in Van Horn. She'd disappear from the area for weeks or months, then be spotted near Deming or Sierra Blanca or Terralingua. Guys, look at the map, okay? I'm going to take a pause here. Look at the map, and some of these places I'm talking about are hundreds of miles apart, okay? So there were rumors that a child had died, that she was wealthy, that she was the child of a former rodeo star, and that she had property near Redford. No one really knew except perhaps her burro. La Reina had a series of burros. What she asked of them was tough work, and she'd trade them out when they became too footsore to go on. Mouse-colored, chocolate, spotted, some lasted longer than others. Despite the rigors of the job, she and her animals built deep, abiding relationships. One summer, she appeared driving a pea green 1960s Cadillac. The back end had been cut out somehow, and she had convinced the burro to hop in and take a ride. Pass by them on the road to Presidio, and she'd be sacked out in the shade of the car, the burro standing crazily in the Cadillac's trunk. Mostly, though, it was just her and the donkey, or burro. There actually is a difference between a burro and a donkey. She was in Marfa the day that Martha Stewart came to town. Judy had tied the burro to a pole downtown and gone inside Old Wynn's dime store. I happened upon Martha as she and her entourage discovered the burro. La Reina, at that time, had developed a collection of plastic Pepsi bottles and metal spoons, and dozens of each hung off the burro's pack. He was tied with bits of string pieced together, and he could have walked off any time he chose. Martha and her friends didn't mean any harm, but as they fingered the objects on the back, petted him, and posed for pictures, I asked them to move on, and I told them that his owner wouldn't appreciate their messing with the burro. Sure enough, Judy came hustling out of Wynn's and set about untying the burro in a hurry. By the look she threw me, her face suffused with anger and betrayal, I know she didn't realize I was trying to help. It's okay. Lots of people tried to help. And I'm keep in mind I'm reading this from the writer's perspective. So everyone I've talked to has a story about her, and they've all watched after her, Ivy says. Judy's last burro was Merle. A convenience store in Alpine saved up green lollipops that he liked, though that was about as much charity as Lorena would stand. She was regularly offered a place to stay, a warm shower, money, food, but she rarely took anything more than a lift from one place to another. Becky Dean Walker, the county judge in Hudspeth County, rigged a 55-gallon drum of water outside her ranch gate specifically for the burro lady and her donkey. Oh, you shouldn't have done that, Judy told the judge. Every time Lorena stayed on Walker's land, she'd sprinkle change at the water drum. If I didn't pick up the change, she wouldn't water the donkey until I took it, Walker recalls. She didn't want to be a burden. The winter was a beast in far west Texas. It snowed, it iced, the wind bullied, and it was just damn cold. In the cafes we wandered. What of Lorena? Judge Walker's phone rang. Judy Majors was dead. She had been camped at the roadside in Sierra Blanca. A passerby realized that she had collapsed to the ground, and he rushed to her side and dialed 911. Help arrived within a minute or so, but she had slipped away. The burro was braying. She wasn't alone when she died, Walker says. News of her death rocketed around the Big Bend. Ivy had long ago been established as her official guardian. He helped manage the Social Security check she relied on, and he went through his records of her looking for any scrap of information that would lead to a family member, Merle the Burro went to stay with Walker. He grieved, she said. He cried for a day and a half, Walker recalls. I'd piled all his blankets in a pen, and he'd look under them for her, moaning. It just makes you cry. Ivy says that Judy had confided in him years before that her wish was to be buried at Boot Hill, the beautiful and sad cemetery at Terlingua Ghost Town. She wanted her boots and spurs and her hat. A fund was established to pay for the funeral expenses. Suddenly, a revelation. Detective work by friends and a dash of luck led to a daughter in South Dakota who told of 2 more daughters and 2 sons and 11 grandchildren. They scrambled onto planes from South Dakota, North Dakota, Arizona, and California. They had not seen their mother in over 20 years. As they drove into Terlingua late on Super Bowl Sunday, they encountered Ivy, who had just pulled up with their mother's casket. Judy's children carried her coffin into St. Agnes, the church on the hill behind town, and there she lay all night. Who knows of loneliness or hardship? What distances divide us? Off and on there was laughter. One man exclaimed that her newly discovered children were now family members to us all, and amens rang out. Amazing Grace was sung, and as the crowd got to their 3rd verse, Ivy stepped forward, folded the Indian blanket, and handed the children her hat, boots, and spurs. Helpers carefully removed the slats under the coffin and lowered the Burro lady into her grave. There were tears. Judy Major's children had never been to Texas before. In deference to their mother's fierce protection of her privacy, no one asked them how this had come to be, how their mother had left them, and why she followed a path so rugged, solitary, and severe. We really appreciate how the community looked after her, her son Clinton Wood said at the potluck after the funeral. We thank the community for embracing her and the way she was. There was no changing her. Merle the Burro went to live in California with Major's son Clay Gilman. Her children say they may return to Texas to show Major's 11 grandchildren the country she loved. Spring has come and turkey vultures wheel overhead. The Burro lady lies in Boot Hill. The ground is her bed, the sky her blanket, the Chisos her sentinel. If anybody on this podcast ever saw the Burro lady or heard about the Burro lady out in West Texas, I would be interested in hearing and reading more about it. Contact me. You can find me on themichaelmitchell.com. Shoot me an email. But sounds like an interesting lady with a lot of secrets. And who knows? Who knows why she did what she did and just disappeared for 20 years way out in West Texas? I don't know. So what do y'all think? Let me know what other weird, off-the-wall, interesting Texas history you'd like to hear about. I want to thank our sponsors again, of course, me and Victory Home Loans. Keep in mind, if you know someone moving to or in Texas and Oklahoma, send them my way. TheMichaelMitchell.com, THE MichaelMitchell.com. I love to help people get into homes of their own. I do not finance burros. Thank you all for tuning in to Once Upon a Time in Texas and being one of the plus 3 or 4 people that my friend Mayor Tim Short thinks listens to this podcast. Thank you all for listening. And Tim Short, if you hear this, I'm just giving you a hard time, man. That dig this morning was awesome. I couldn't have pulled that off any better. I love it. All right, guys, that's it for me. As always, remember, the stars at night are big and bright, deep in the heart of Texas. Y'all have a great week.